Do you worry a lot?
Quite a bit, yeah.
What sort of things do you worry about?
Well, what if it all goes wrong? What if the house burns down one day? What do we do then? I mean, we'd have to get somewhere else to live. We'd have to move away.
And when you worry about these sort of things, do you talk to them about it?
Well, people say it's too much to put on a child, for them to know all that. There isn't a necessity for them to know it, you know, maybe later, when they're older. But, you know, if they haven't got any issues or they're not really asking any questions, then there's no point in telling them.
Who do you talk to? Do you go to people in your family?
What family exactly? We have like friends where it's her and her granddaughter. They're not family, but I don't think family have to be actually related to you. I think they just have to want to relate with you.
Okay, thank you for talking with me today, and I'm going to ask your auntie some questions now, okay?
Very lucky, and I went to Liverpool and I took the research up there, and my research is all based around what matters to children living in kinship care. And I was looking at what matters to the children and thinking about and saying, this is what, presenting my research, and they were saying, that's great, this is what we really want, this is what we want social workers to know. This is what we want social workers to know. We want them to listen to us. We want them to understand our lives. And importantly, we want them to do what they say they're going to do. Those are the messages that they have asked. It always disheartens me as a social worker when you hear that as much as we talk about listening to children, it disheartens me to know that we're not doing it enough. And that's a shame, because all of us want to listen to kids, right? Hopefully. But what the kids are saying is we're not doing enough. Before I kind of go into it, I want us to always be really mindful of one thing. Kinship care is financially attractive for cash-strapped local authorities. It's a financially attractive option for local authorities, for policymakers. And when we look at policymakers, and when we look at politicians, when we look at big reviews, you probably know the one that I'm talking about. When we look at big reviews and they say, actually what we need to do is we need to grow kinship care. That's what we need to do. We need to make sure that it's going to revolutionise the whole way we look at care. And I think that's a really good starting point in some senses, but we have to be careful, because actually one of the reasons, and I suspect one of the main reasons, is this: it's financially attractive for cash-strapped local authorities. Kinship care can and will be exploited. That's it. It's very depressing, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my journey. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I learned, because I think that's really important. Again, I told you I'd make it about me, so that's what we're going to do. Before I do that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the definition of kinship care. So when I started, and when I talk to people in the pub or wherever it might be, and they say, oh, so what do you do? And I talk about kinship care and listening to kids. They say, so what is kinship care? And I used to say, well, kinship care is the long-term childcare placement for relatives, non-related, extended family members, family friends, I guess. And it's an alternative to adoption and fostering. It's a nice alternative. I no longer do that. I no longer talk about that. And that's the other point that's vital here, that we should not be looking at kinship care as an alternative to fostering adoption, because again it goes into that narrative of kinship care is a financially attractive, morally attuned, because we're keeping families together, way to ensure that we have a nice placement for children, an alternative to fostering and adoption. And when we start looking into terms of research and different types of kinship care, there are usually two types. We have the formal type, where we have social work intervention, these overbearing, interfering social workers coming along and telling these grandparents how they should be parenting. I've already parented. Telling these grandparents how they should be parenting. Or we have the informal kinship care. Don't worry, we'll just leave it up to you. We'll leave it up to you as a family to sort it out. You as communities to sort it out. Lovely way of thinking. Leave it up to you as increasingly cost of living crisis, impoverished families, increasingly cost of living crisis, impoverished communities. But also we need to think about safety. We need to think about things like intergenerational trauma. The reality, and we're talking about realities here, the reality is that children are placed in families where there has been dysfunction. That's not to say that people can't change. That's not to say that families can't change. But we have to recognize that we are placing children in situations where they have to manage a lot of different things that are going on, where families have to manage all these different relationships, all these different tensions that are happening. That's what's inspired me when going into kinship care and working in kinship care, is seeing how these families manage these really difficult relationships that are around. So even when we start looking at things in terms of formal and informal, that's not enough. Some families will be part of this formal kinship care, but then we start saying, it's fine, off you go, do what you want. Some families might be part of informal kinship care, but need that support. And then all of a sudden, so these demarcations, these distinctions don't work. And so I was kind of talking about these things when I was working as a practitioner in kinship care. And I was sitting around the table with my colleagues, with my lovely colleagues, and we were talking about kinship care. We were talking about, placements, life story work. We were talking about educational outcomes. We were talking about relationship-based practice, trauma-informed practice, all these useful, really, really valuable things. And there's me in the middle, holding court, as always. And we were sitting there and we were talking about all these things, very, very useful, very important. And I kind of walked away and I kind of thought, well, wait a minute. What if it wasn't me? What if it wasn't us talking about these things? What if children were around that table? Would they be talking about educational outcomes? Will they be talking about life story work? Would they be talking about all these things that are important? And the answer is possibly. They'll possibly be talking about school. They'll possibly be talking about the future. But they'll definitely be talking about relationships. So I was kind of thinking, well, if we have all these definitions of what kinship care, of how we recognize kinship care, because this is about recognition, actually, how do children recognize their lives? How do they recognize this thing we call kinship care? Well, they even call it kinship care. So that was the start of my learning journey. When I started on my PhD, there's me in an ill-fitting jumper outside my door, about to go into my PhD. And there are the things that matter to me. When I talk about things that matter to me, we all need to think of, we'll come back to this. But we talk about things that matter to us. And these are the things that matter to me. Kinship care, child participation, and social work. So we talked a little bit about kinship care, talked a little bit about child participation. So, this is a joke that I was told that I shouldn't be doing, just to say that. So, when I started, I had these assumptions. So we're going to play a game here called a meringue, because we're in Scotland. How do we say Scott? Does everyone get the joke? Caroline, please. A meringue. A meringue. All right, so we'll play this game. We will play this game. So the game is, it's better for the responsibility and care for children to be positioned within families, peer support, and charity support rather than social work in the state. Am I wrong? Kinship care should be recognised as a permanent solution that is a better alternative to foster care and adoption. Am I wrong? Children in kinship care are more likely than those in non-kinship state care to achieve better outcomes with less risk. There is an extensive untapped resource in wider family networks to care for their children. And utilising this by better supporting kinship care will reduce the number of children who are looked after. Again, that's part of the big review. Can I mention it? The McAllister review that happened in England. That whole idea that we're going to reduce the amount of children that are looked after. And the last one is that we're not listening to children enough. I think that's probably the one where I was probably the most right about, not the opposite of Amarang, which is a souffle? Don't know. So that's the last one. Because when I was thinking about practice, again, we often have these big assessments. And where do we have the children's voices? We have them right at the bottom. And what do we do when we have the LAC reviewing it, the IRO coming along saying, have you got the children's voices? We're like, oh, yes, they are not quite old enough to have their views known. I don't know, but they seem happy within the placement. What we should be doing is we should be placing children's views, here's an idea, radical, right? Placing views right at the front of all of our reports, of all of our thinking. That's not to say that we need to start saying, right, we need to do exactly what children are saying. I'll come on to that in a minute. But it's a good starting point. That's the better starting point than being the little bit at the end that we have to remember to do. So, all of these different things that I was kind of thinking, am I right, am I wrong, am I wrong? All these different things that I was thinking, okay. And I was probably wrong about a lot of them. But I'm not to blame, to be honest. If you think of these things, you're not necessarily to blame. Because we know, and looking into research, we know that kinship care, compared to, if we're going to do comparisons to fostering and adoption, is under-recognised, underappreciated, and often poorly supported. It is, in effect, the unacknowledged, unrecognised, misrecognised, third pillar of children's social care system. The reason why we do that, the reason why I think we start not recognising it or trying not to think about it too much, is because we get stuck in this loop. And this loop is it part of social work, social services? Is it a placement? Or is it just something in terms of a private family life that we're kind of invading? I don't know. And we get stuck in these loops. And so no matter what happens, when we look at new regulations, new policies, new legislation that might be coming out very soon, or the kinship care strategy that happened in England in 2023. When we start looking at those things, they are battling with this question, going round and round and round in circles, and they won't get anywhere because they're always kind of thinking whether it's one thing or the other. It will always be both and. So this idea of growing kinship care, as highlighted by Josh McAllister. I was very lucky to have put a chapter in a book with Christian and Robin about the challenges and opportunities of kinship care. So I kind of go into this into a lot more detail when I'm speaking to them. But when we start looking at kind of keeping LAC numbers down, the reality is that we actually don't have the data for that. So we know that if we supported kinship carers better, then less placements would break down. Great. But we also know that in terms of things like better outcomes, actually characteristics of children going into kinship care may be different may be favourable than for children that are going to fostering and adoption. We have to make sure that we don't confuse correlation with causality. It's essential that we don't do. And it's essential that we don't base policy on that as well. Because what we're kind of saying is, do you know what? It'll be better for kids, and actually we're not funding them enough, and we don't need to, because there's better outcomes. So it's fine. Everything's fine. Just make sure we can kind of push it away. Private family life. This idea of an untapped resource of family and community. Part of it may be true. However, the other part of it is that, again, we know in terms of communities, we've kind of talked about this a little bit in this conference. In terms of communities, we know that it's not always a positive thing. We know that actually some of us have experienced, probably all of us, have experienced not only the positives of communities, but also the harm that can be caused by communities not wanting us to be part of them, or communities not wanting or making moral judgments, or pushing us away. So we know all of this stuff, but yet we're very quick to jump on these things and say, hey, it's good, because we can grow kinship care. And why do we do that? Kinship care is financially attractive for cash-strapped local authorities. The other difficulty is 75% of families in kinship care arrangements, 75% live in financial hardship. That's 75% of these children. Right, so I put all of this stuff to one side. I love Jennifer Aniston and that advert because she's just very so patronising, but yet brilliant in the same breath. So how do we avoid the exploitation of kinship care and recognise kinship care for what it is? Through research, the reason why I love my research, but also, importantly, listening to the voices of experts by experience, let's call them that for now, and listening, including children. It struck me, I am really grateful, by the way, for receiving the award. I am grateful for PhD. I am grateful for all of the amount of kind of kudos that has been gathered. But the only reason why there has been kudos about our research is because there's not that much research that listens to kids. That's awful. That is absolutely shocking. We will listen to kids in certain different areas, but in terms of kinship care, there isn't that much there. So, looking at methodology. So we're talking about theories of recognition. So we're talking about Honneth, Fraser. So these are theories of recognition. These are the theories that ground themselves within the work that I do. Now, these theories, the way that they came about, the way that they emerged, was not through my brilliance or my absolutely amazing thoughts from anywhere like that. It was through conversations with children. They were talking to me about things like. They were talking to me about things like being recognized. They were talking to me about, you know what it's like when people, all of that stuff. And throughout the whole process, I would go back to them and talk to them about different theories. I would place it in the same way, and we would talk and we would develop theories together. Recognizing kinship care for what it is, recognizing the experience of people, make sure that we bring people along on board, because actually the people that understand the situations that they're in are more likely to be the people that are in those situations. So what we have here is we have the three different spheres, as Honneth would talk about it. So the first is emotional affection, so love. People that know me know that I have kind of an issue with love. Not with love, but with love in terms of it being kind of bandied around too much. I think love's great, by the way. But it just, sometimes we use love as a bit of a shortcut of, all we need is love in the system. Stable homes built on love. Sounds lovely. What does it mean? But this idea of, let's think of ourselves, this idea of actually what we all need is we need to be recognized by the people around us, the people that we have interactions with. That's what's really important to us in our lives, having that recognition for who we are. The second thing is values within communities. We come along to BASWA conferences, and we recognize the shared values. Social work, shared values. That's why we feel at home here. We may have little tussles now and again, maybe, whatever happens. But we have these shared values because we feel recognized within our communities. And we kind of forget that sometimes when we're looking at children, because we look at the first thing, attachment theory. Very important. It is very important, by the way. But attachment theory, it's all about those primary relationships. And we're talking about, and if we're going to go really deep into it, those primary relationships are usually around mothers and children. Gendered. Everything is gendered, especially within social work. So values within communities. The next thing, so in terms of legal relationships, so having policies, having practices, having legislation to ensure that we recognize actually what the situation is for children. So the children were talking about that as well. And the difficulty is that when we start thinking about these things, what kinship care is, what kinship care isn't, we start going down this track of very kind of monological thinking. So monological thinking is when we start thinking of things as one thing or another. We see this played out in Twitter. I don't use Twitter anymore because of monological thinking. You either are in this camp or you're in this camp. You either believe this or you believe this. Children are either these most lovely, vulnerable, innocent young children, or else there's something. They're a little bit dangerous, aren't they? Well, you know, they're really, really naive. They don't really understand what's going on in their lives. Or actually, no, you know what? Childhood studies, for example. You know what? Children really understand. We need to listen to children. Right? Good stuff. They are the center of everything that we should do, and they should not be challenged because they know best about their lives. The reality is that we can be these things at the same time. Children can be these things at the same time. They can be naive, and they can be wise, the same as me, the same as all of us. So if we start looking at monological thinking, are they adults, are they children? They are both. They are like adults, but they also have a childhood. We need to start thinking in terms of the both and, coming up to that again. When we start thinking about voice as well, we start thinking about whether people have a voice or they don't. The problem with that is that if we start talking about people having a voice, we're talking about voice normally. The other difficulty is you're all sitting here and you have lots of voices in your head. I'm feeling a bit sleepy. Oh, it's great to be here. Oh, it's really nice to all of that. I'm not sure if I want to. I might do that. There's lots of things going on in our heads. This idea of voices, this idea of voice, and sometimes I get asked, so what does the children think? What is their voice? And the answer is lots of different things, simultaneously at one moment in time, but throughout time as well. And that's just for one child. So don't ask me what children think about, lots of children think about, because that's many, many voices. Let's not simplify. Let's not think about things in terms of the monological. Let's start thinking of things in terms of the dialogical. So we're talking about the dialogical here. So this is working within the in-between spaces, the both and. Things can be true at the same time. Imagine that. And it's this process of having these conversations with children and actually having these conversations sensitively about what's going on in our lives, not saying, oh, you should be thinking this or you should be thinking that. Actually, we're exploring all of these tensions that we all have within our lives about what kinship care means, what family life means, what it means to be with your, do you like your mum or not? Well, I'm no longer, Dialogical thinking is having those conversations about ethics. So when we're talking about children, so is it important that I listen to you? Yes. Excellent. Okay. Is it important that, what's the difference between adults and children? Nothing. Okay. What is my responsibility? As an adult, what's my responsibility for you as a child? It's your responsibility to keep me safe. You should be using your experience. You should be using your wisdom. We're social workers. It's mandated that we should be ensuring children's safety and well-being. We can't wish that away with changing language. I mean, it's a good start, but we can't. There is a reality to what we do. There is a reality, but there is also those tensions. So the ethical process, again, involves including children at the very start about what ethics means, what it means to be responsible in terms of research. Including children within all of the research. That's what this is all about. I use this thing called critical realism. It took me about 2 years to get my head around, so I'm going to go through it really, really quickly. But what happens is that sometimes what we focus on is the branches of the tree up there, the empirical, the things that can be seen. And we say we need to change that. Actually, we need to reduce the numbers of children living in that are looked after. We need to do this, we need to do that. Or sometimes we don't even see that, but we know that something's happening. So that's the trunk of the tree. What we should be looking at, those things are very important, is the roots, the underlying causes of these things. What's important? What actually matters? Is it important to reduce the number of looked after children? That's a valid question, right? So let's look at the roots. Let's look at the roots of people's lives. What matters to people? Because that grows the tree. That shows us what happens, and then we can start looking at that. How do we get to those roots? We theorize. We use theories, such as recognition theory, for example. I'm going to take you on a little journey now. What time is it? Excellent. So I'm going to take you on a little journey. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think back. I'm not going to ask you to think back to your childhoods. Don't worry, it's not that kind of party. It's fine. I'm going to ask you just to think back to this morning. What was the first thing you did this morning? Was it checking your phone? Was it getting out of bed, having a shower? Was it phoning a loved one? Was it making sure that someone that's unwell is okay? Was it playing a game on your phone? What matters to you? What did you value? What did you prioritize? If I asked everyone here, you would all probably say different things. So we're not concentrating on the tree trunk. Oh, sorry, the branches of the tree. What we're concentrating on here is the roots. So if I asked you, we could probably simmer it down to actually the things that matter to you. Family, professionalism, care, kindness, distraction. All of these things, that's what matters to you. And those are the conversations that I wanted to have with children. What matters to you is important because it not only looks at the way that we talk about things, but it's a valuation on things. And it's a valuation on things. So we're talking about the subjective, but we're also talking about the objective. Family is a thing. It's not just determined by language. How we describe family is determined by language. It is both and. So I started looking at the mechanisms, and here are the mechanisms that the children started talking to me about, that I started talking to the children about. These different mechanisms. We're going to focus on recognition and misrecognition, because that was the paper. But you will see that things like connection and separation, care and protection, independent risk, recognition, misrecognition, they all kind of, they all intertwine. And notice when we're talking about connection and separation, we're talking about them together. Both and. Just because someone is not physically present doesn't mean that they're not psychologically present. That's really important. It was really important for these kids to think about. Just because someone's not there doesn't mean that they're not there. So thinking of these things as both and, in connection with each other. So let's go to, enough about me, let's talk about what these kids actually say. So recognition of family. So this is Sydney. Well, I've got Nan and Grandad, aunts and uncles, Mum and Dad, and Anna, she was not genetically related, who now lives with us. So I call her family because she is my family, really. I don't know how you really lose family. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And it's just if they're not there anymore, but they're still like here, but they're like in heaven. She's talking about family in ways that are not described in policy and practice. When we talk in policy and practice, we talk about family as something that is, something that we can see, the branches of the tree. What she's talking about, the roots, the meaning of family for her. And it's not just about things that you can see. If we think about people that we have lost, our loved ones that we have lost, they don't cease becoming family when we've lost them. We may have different relationships with them, and we have to work through that. Loss, grief, all of those things. But we have relationships with people. They are still with us. And this is what Sydney's talking about. And I started talking to Sydney, as all the children, actually. Do you know there's this guy called Morgan? Just this guy. And he talks about how family is not just about what is, it's about how we do family. Sociological theory, Morgan Finch, sociological theory. And the kids are saying, yeah, that's exactly it. That's amazing. Because actually, family isn't just about what I can see. And then they said to me, but do you know what, Paul? My brother's still my brother. Oh, God, okay. Oh, that doesn't help. Oh, Morgan, oh, no, okay, all right. I'd forgotten the both and. I'd forgotten that actually family is not just about how we create, how we do, how we display. It's all about, as well, about blood relations. The both and. Again, something that is not within policy and practice, because we like to have things kind of nicely done. Who is family, who isn't? Recognition of home. Should children be sharing, over at a certain age, be sharing with children of the same sex or the same gender? Massive debate. Let's all talk about the Housing Act, but let's not. Massive debate. And I had that debate with kids. I was saying, so what's it like sharing in terms of your siblings? And they would say things like, well, you know, my sister's a bit annoying, actually. She's a bit messy. And it can be a bit frustrating. But actually, it's quite nice, because sometimes I get to speak to her. When I think about people that I might live with, when I think about people that I might live with, it is about those kind of tensions. Yes, absolutely. We can be annoyed with each other. Actually, it's nice to live with people as well. The both and. Here's Jordan, who had this uniquely unideal, probably, in terms of lots of policy and practice, where he would live with his one set of grandparents 1 week, another set of grandparents another week. Isn't that terrible? They need stability. Kids need to be in one place. We do different things in different places because there are different people around here. And I don't have one of the carers' children here, which can be a good, but can also be bad. The both and, managing, understanding that it can be different things at the same time. Recognition of similarity and difference. one of the hardest and probably most horrible questions that I ask kids was, do you feel different? That's a horrible question. Do you feel different? Do you feel, well, I do feel different, but I don't want to be different. I don't be different. Harmony was saying, I don't like being called different. Yeah, and I'm not trying to be dramatically different. The way that we position ourselves is important. Put on a nice jacket today so that people respect me. Is it working? The difficulty is that it's not just about how we position ourselves. It's about how others are positioning us as well. And kids are really, really aware of that. So as much as they want to sometimes partition, what's known as partitioning, not mention that they're in a different family type, not mention that that's their grandmother, at other times they want to ensure that they have that recognition that they need the same resources. They shouldn't be living in financial hardship. That there is a difference there. That they may have some differences there. The both and. Recognizing similarity and difference, not separate things. Recognition of cultural and religious affiliations. Now this is close to my heart. I think often we kind of miss this a lot in terms of research about the impact of religion, the impact of culture, but religion especially. Here's Danielle. Church matters because me and Purple, by the way, all the kids chose their own kind of pseudonyms. Me and Purple go out with these adults, and then we learn more about stuff, and we also do fun activities, because God is real. And God can be in your heart, and if you feel sad, you can just pray. But if you're at school, some people might laugh at you if you go to church. If we think about theories of recognition, community, here's a shining example. Again, we focus a lot on those primary relationships, on home. Actually, kids are looking outside, looking for recognition for who they are, not just within that. And what do we need? We need resources so that kids can go on the school trips. We need resources so they can go to the after-school clubs that are not necessary for children. They are necessary for children. So that they can go to church if that's what they want to do. Recognition of the importance of dialogical participation. They didn't actually say that, by the way. But this is Kimberly. What I would say is that we do know things, but sometimes we don't really understand. Like things that are happening in life. But things that we do know, that we've experienced, like we've gone and seen them, they should listen to us. But they should listen to them as well. I think they should listen to both of the sides. Who wants Kimberly to run Twitter? Very nuanced understanding of dialogical participation. There is nuance, shock, horror. There's nuance to everything that we do. Two things can be the same at once. We need to be listening to each other. We may not agree with each other. In fact, the kids were talking about conflict. And they were saying, actually, conflict is all right. Conflict's all right because I know and trust that it's going to be okay. So what happens when you have an argument? Normally I go to my room and I might slam the door and I know that like in a few hours it'll be fine. Because we both calm down. It's all right. Family relationships. But they need us to have that conflict. The way that we ensure that we can compromise is to have that kind of bit of conflict so that we can have long-term solutions. That's what compromise is, having long-term solutions. Is kinship care a family practice or a permanence placement? The big question that all of us adults, policymakers, researchers, practitioners want to know. Is it helpful? Yeah, like it doesn't like to be like labels. It's just like another way of being a normal family. Beautiful phrase. Like there is no authority. It just needs to be, I think, it needs to be a facility that's available to people if and when they need it, rather than something that has been put in place by someone else, which is just like, doesn't even need to be formal or anything like that. It just needs to be there, I think, for however you need it. What she's talking about here, I think, is another revolutionary idea. What she's talking about here is having support for personal needs, rather than having blanket support for, let's listen to what people need and give them support for that. Revolutionary. There you go. What she's talking about is that things should not be based, as they currently are, on whether there are legal orders, SGOs, whether there are placement orders, whether there are care orders, whether there are the right kind of carers or the wrong kind of carers, whether they have been through a placement panel or not, whether they're in a placement or not. She's not talking about that. She's talking about actually supporting people according to their needs. This is something that I think policymakers already struggle with because they like to put labels on things. For SGOs, we need the support. For this people, we need support. And we need the support because it's like fostering and adoption. Where do we get all of our assessments for SGOs? Through fostering adoption. Where do we go out marching? We go out marching and we're fighting for the rights for SGOs, for kinship carers, to have the same amount of money that foster carers get. Seems reasonable, right? Wait, but we're doing that thing again of comparing. Children don't want to be talking about placements. Their family life is not a placement. They are not doing life story. They don't want life story work. They are doing life story work. They're thinking about their past. They're thinking about people that aren't there. They were showing me things within their house, tickets, things. This is the first. They were doing that life story work. So we need to stop this idea in terms of this is what we need to label it. We need to recognize kinship care for what it is rather than what it's not. We know it's not fostering. We know it's not adoption. We know it's not care with birth parents, if I can use that phrase. So let's stop saying what it's not. Let's start saying what it is. How do we know? How do we know what kinship care is? And the answer is, remember I told you the answer at the very beginning. The answer is, ask kids. Listen to children. Don't put that box at the bottom. Stop doing it. Don't have massive reviews and say, actually, what we'll do is we'll collect information, then we'll put it back to the experts by experience and see what they think. Well, we've done it the wrong way round. Stop doing those things. Recognize it for what it is, and we do that by another way of being a normal family, those binaries, those tensions, by asking people that are experiencing it, and that includes children. And that we're not talking about ages. Are there any ages on any of these children? None. All these children are of various ages. They all were able to have intelligent, nuanced conversations with me. They're more than happy to. Try not to think about things like placement, contact. Start thinking about things like family life, connections. That whole thing, again, of actually we should be comparing things to adoption and fostering. We should be naming kinship care as something that's alternative to kinship care. Stop it. Just stop it. I know it's hard. It's taken me ages to stop it. But just please, we need to stop doing it. We need to start thinking about what kinship care is, fighting for kinship care as something within its own right. And the last thing, the thing that I need remembering, actually second to last thing, the thing that I keep remembering, that they keep reminding me, is that things don't work out in the either or. It isn't the dialogical, it isn't the monological. We are constantly working with the in-between spaces, the inner thoughts, the inner conversations that we have, as Margaret Archer would talk about it. These inner conversations that make us react, the way that we position ourselves and the way that we are positioned. All of those things, how we're navigating life, that's the important bit. Not the branches of the tree, educational attainment. What are they doing? That's not interesting. Does a kid want their light on? That's when they go to sleep. That's important, but that's not the question. The question is, how does a child negotiate having a light on? That's a transferable skill. How do they work within the tensions? And the last thing, just to say, is listen to kids. So, thank you. That's it.
Paul, are you willing to take a few questions?
Yes, absolutely.
We've got some time. Okay, we have a microphone over there. Who would like to ask a question or make a comment? Anyone there? Not either one. Lewis, and then
Hiya, Paul. I'm Lewis. Nice to see you. We've met virtually, but not in person.
Yes.
Fantastic presentation, so valuable. I'm currently an IRO.
Yes.
So my question would be, if you were an IRO like me, what would you be doing to reflect on what you've said today? Is there anything I should really be focusing on and changing in my practice?
Absolutely. And IRAs have had a hard time, haven't they? Recently. Well, not just recently. This idea that they have kind of dualities in terms of their position and all of this kind of stuff. But that's reflected in terms of practitioners as well. The dualities of our roles, listening to kids, also making sure care plans are right, making sure. What I would always say is just twisting things around a little bit. Actually, it's not, I mean, it's both and, isn't it? It's important that we listen to foster carers. The most important thing, the most important question you should be asking is, so what are the children saying? All right, so then what are the adults saying? Not the other way around. Some of the research that I did look at in terms of kinship care, because there's some stuff by Elaine Farmer and some amazing Julie Southern, all these amazing, amazing people. But what really interested me was actually their work was not just the voices of children, it was the voices of adults. And when you have the voices of adults, it's almost like, did the children kind of back up what the adults are saying or not? Not the other way around. Adults always take precedence because we're much more knowing, aren't we? We're much more clever. We know what's going on, right? So I would always say that's the first thing. It's making sure that they're going out, that practitioners are going out, and making sure that they start their assessments, if we're going to call it that again. Make sure they start their work from kids. Kids are really interesting as well, because I kind of went to, there's this little bit as well about, should we just listen to you? And as they were saying, you know, we should listen to both. But came back to that thing of, you have more experience as adults. It is your duty to protect us. It is your duty to provide for us. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a say. We should have a say. We should have those complicated conversations. Don't expect me to have answers, but have those conversations, including those into those real conversations. I would use my this idea of what matters as well, rather than the looking at, is there a lock on the child's door? Hopefully not. Is there, you know?
Yeah. Thank you, Liz. Do you want to make a comment there? Oh. No, that's okay. We have one question over here. No? Yes, good. Well, just time for one more, I think. Unless anyone else is burning. That's fine.
Sorry, every time I get a mic, I start to sing. Paul, that was brilliant. That was brilliant. You're no rang. That's not true. And it's some of these conversations we've been having for a wee while,
yes.
only meeting in person. And it's enshrined in law that children's voices come first. So, and it's not new. Yes, adults have got more experience, but I've never had experience of being a child in this day and age. So it's about safeguarding. So they've got that notion. What do you think actually gets in the way of children's voices coming first? And I like the fact you were saying, yes, we do put it at the end, but is it only children? We also do that for older adults. In fact, all people that I know service uses a weird voice.
Yeah.
We do it for everybody that we work to. It's that voice comes in as an ad. So what is it that gets in the way, do you think, as a profession, that we don't put the people we work to front and centre?
That's a great question, and a question that I speak to Gillian Roosh about quite a lot. Just a little bit of a name drop there. I speak to Gillian Roosh about quite a lot, and in her... she's kind of brought together an edited book. So the answer to that question will be, you'll find that next year in a chapter that I've written. I think it comes back to monological thinking, and I think sometimes what we do is we either just say, children, we need to listen to children. It's so important that we change the language around what we talk about children. Are they kids? We can't be service users. No, we shouldn't be calling people service users. Experts, no, we shouldn't be doing that. They're distractions. I mean, they're useful. We need to get it right. But they're distraction, and it's monological thought. It's working on that level. And it's kind of either... we give, it's almost like, sometimes it's like, sometimes people draft me in to say, so tell me, what do the children think? What do children in kinship care think? And that's always interesting, because I'm not a child. I might be childish, but I'm not a child. But secondly, they're wanting an answer. And sometimes I think we go to experts by experience and children and say, tell me what the answer is. Actually, there are many answers. So then what can happen on the other side, and we've seen this go through history, is this monological thought. Either they are the experts by experience, or actually they're not. Oops. They're one thing or the other. So we're working in the middle space. We should be working in the middle space with people. And I think that's where we're going wrong, because we're going from one side to the other. It's about reflection, reflexivity, I think, positionality, how we position ourselves, all of those things. So that's where I think we are.
Thank you. That is incredibly helpful. I think we now understand why Paul won the award. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.